Before the Ice Age giants, the terror birds that hunted a broken world in the Paleocene. 62 million years ago, something woke up in North America, and it changed everything. Not a climate shift, not an asteroid. A creature so perfectly designed to kill that it reshaped the entire food chain, and we've been ignoring how this happened for decades. Stay with me through this video, because I'm going to reveal the single reason these terror birds succeeded where other predators failed, and it has nothing to do with what you've been taught. If you're already subscribed, you know we focus on the giants that ruled the late Ice Age, but the Paleocene, that's the era right after the dinosaurs vanished, it had its own giants, and they were even more terrifying. The question is, how did these animals evolve so fast? How did they go from small predators to apex hunters in just a few million years? Drop a comment below. Tell me which Pleistocene creature you've always wanted me to cover in depth. I read every single one. Right now, I need you to hold on to something. The complete guide to predator evolution across deep time, from terror birds through dire wolves to the saber-tooth cats, that's available in the description and pinned in the top comment. It breaks down the mechanisms of apex predation in ways you won't find anywhere else online. It's a paid resource, but if you want the real skeleton key to understanding how these animals changed the world, it's there. 20 million years before the mammoths walked North America, the terror birds owned this continent. Gastornis, a name most people have never heard, stood nearly 7 feet tall. Not 5 feet, not 6, 7. Its skull was the size of a horse's head, and its beak could snap bone like kindling. We've found thousands of skeletal remains in the Bighorn Basin, in Wyoming, and across the Pacific Northwest. The fossil record shows they dominated multiple ecosystems simultaneously. That shouldn't be possible. One apex predator per landscape. That's the rule. Except it wasn't. What changed everything was something so simple you'd miss it. These birds didn't hunt like cats. They didn't stalk in packs. Gastornis hunted in daylight, in open forest, using a hunting strategy that required almost no energy expenditure. They were sprint hunters, short, devastating bursts of speed over distances of 30 to 40 yards, then pin their prey and kill with one strike to the spine or skull. No chase, no exhaustion, no risk. Compare that to a modern lion. It can chase prey for miles, burning calories like a furnace. A lion needs to hunt every few days just to survive. Gastornis, it could kill once and rest for a week. That's not an advantage, that's a superpower. And that's how one species could dominate where others would starve. The fossil evidence tells a story that most paleontologists won't say out loud. Within 3 million years of the Cretaceous extinction, Gastornis populations had spread from Europe to North America to South America. The only way that happens is if the prey base was absolutely flooded with resources. And it was. The mammals of the early Paleocene were small, most of them under 50 pounds, and there were thousands of species competing for the same vegetation. The birds didn't displace those species, they culled them, they kept populations balanced. But here's where it stops being simple. The terror birds weren't just successful, they were dominant for 15 million years. 15 million! The mammoths of the late Ice Age, by comparison, lasted maybe 4 million before they disappeared. Why? What made Gastornis so stable that it could maintain ecological supremacy for longer than most modern species have even existed? The answer involves something we've never properly studied in the fossil record: parental investment. Terror birds were social, not herd social, like modern ostriches, territory social, pairs that stayed bonded for life, and they defended their nesting grounds with lethal aggression. We know this because in the fossil record of creatures found near Gastornis nesting sites, we find the remains of other predators, smaller birds, early carnivorous mammals, all killed in ways consistent with territorial defense, not predation. These birds killed competitors with purpose. That meant no other apex predator could establish itself in Gastornis territory. Imagine that, a single breeding pair that could eliminate every hunting competitor within 3 miles, then hunt cooperatively to feed themselves and their chicks. That pair owned the landscape, and they owned it completely. For millions of years, North America had no dominant mammalian predator. There were no saber-tooth cats, no dire wolves, no pack hunters, just Gastornis, perfectly adapted, perfectly dominant, and perfectly prepared for a world that was about to change in ways they never saw coming. That dominion lasted roughly 6 million years. 6 million. Long enough for Gastornis to become so perfectly fitted to their world that they stopped evolving. They stopped adapting. They simply existed, generation after generation, killing and breeding and defending territory, with the confidence of creatures that had never known failure. Then the climate shifted. It happened gradually at first. Rainfall patterns changed. The dense subtropical forests that had blanketed much of North America began to fragment. Grasslands expanded where rainforest once stood. The patchwork landscape meant less shelter, less cover, and crucially, different prey. The small mammals and early vertebrates that Gastornis hunted began to change their own behavior, moving in new patterns, living in new habitats. Gastornis could not keep up. Their massive bodies were built for pursuit in open terrain and broken forest, not for adaptation. Their hunting strategy, that explosive sprint, that devastating kick, required space and visibility. As their world fragmented into smaller, more complex habitats, they faced a problem they had never encountered before: competition. And it was not coming from birds. By the late Paleocene, roughly 58 million years ago, a new kind of predator was emerging. They were mammals, four-legged, teeth designed not for slicing, but for gripping, tearing, consuming whole chunks of flesh. They were faster than anything that had evolved in mammalian form before. They hunted in coordinated groups. They could adapt their strategy based on prey type and landscape. They were the first true carnivorous mammals to rival the position Gastornis had held alone for so long. One of these emerging hunters was Hyenodon, not a hyena ancestor. The name is misleading. Hyenodon was something older, something more primitive, but no less efficient. Sleek body, powerful jaws, teeth that could snap through bone. They were pack hunters, and they could pursue prey across terrain Gastornis had always dominated. For the first time, Gastornis faced what the fossil record calls resource competition. They were no longer the only hunters. They were no longer guaranteed to succeed. And here is the critical part. Their evolutionary strategy had left them with no flexibility. They could not adapt their hunting technique. They could not shift to new prey. Their entire physiology was committed to a single way of life. Mammals, by contrast, could adapt. They could shift their diet. They could change pack size. They could evolve new hunting strategies within a single generation's behavioral experimentation. They were alive in a way Gastornis, for all their size and power, had stopped being. Hold on, I need you to really focus on this next part, because this is where the real pattern emerges. The story of Paleocene predation is not simply a story of Gastornis losing to Hyenodon. It is a story about what happens when a species has been so successful for so long that success itself becomes a trap. And if you want to understand the deeper mechanics of why dominant species fail when their world changes, why this pattern repeats again and again across Earth's history, the complete guide on predator ecology and extinction cycles is available in the description, and I have also pinned it in the top comment. This is a paid resource, but it walks through the actual signals that paleontologists look for when predicting which species will survive a transition and which will not. Gastornis was a specialist. Hyenodon was a generalist. And in a changing world, generalists survive. Over the next several million years, the fossil record becomes clearer. Gastornis sites appear less frequently. Their remains show signs of stress. bone pathologies, dental wear inconsistent with their normal prey, evidence that they were struggling to feed. Meanwhile, hyaenodon populations expanded. Their fossils appear in more locations, in greater numbers, with better health indicators. The transition was not instantaneous. It took roughly 2 million years for hyaenodon to truly dominate. 2 million years of Gastornis territories shrinking, of breeding pairs failing to produce viable offspring, of the great terror birds slowly, inexorably losing ground to creatures 1/10 their size. By 56 million years ago, Gastornis was effectively gone from North America. A few populations may have lingered in South America for another million years, but their reign was finished. The most dominant predator ever to walk the continent had been replaced not by a larger or stronger creature, but by a more flexible one. The vacuum left by Gastornis did not remain empty for long. Hyaenodon flourished. Within a few 100,000 years, populations exploded across North America, from the Pacific coast to what would one day be the Atlantic seaboard. These were not the massive, top-heavy hunters of the Paleocene. They were something new, something leaner, something far more dangerous because it could adapt. Hyaenodon's success rested on one fundamental advantage: behavioral flexibility. Where Gastornis was a specialist, a creature designed for one job, executed at monumental scale, Hyaenodon was a generalist. It could hunt in groups or alone. It could pursue swift prey across open ground or stalk larger herbivores through thickets where size became a liability rather than an asset. It could shift its diet seasonally, following prey migrations and adjusting when abundance shifted. What makes this transition so compelling is what it reveals about extinction itself. We often imagine species disappearing in dramatic fashion: a meteor strike, a volcanic eruption, a sudden environmental catastrophe that wipes life from the slate. But most extinctions are far quieter. They are measured in generations: a breeding season where fewer offspring survive, a winter where food grows scarce and the young die first, a territory lost to rivals, another lost the next season. The slow mathematics of competition working across centuries and millennia until one morning you realize the last individual of a species has already died, unremarked, unwitnessed. Hold on, I need you to focus on this moment, because this is precisely where most extinction stories lose people. The mechanisms of extinction are not dramatic, they are ecological. The prey populations shift. The climate changes by just a few degrees. The territorial boundaries of one species expand while another's contracts. Disease moves through a population that has no immunity. These forces do not announce themselves, they accumulate. This is exactly the dynamic that would, millions of years later, reshape North America once more. The same patterns that ended Gastornis would echo across the Pleistocene ice ages. The same competition for resources, the same pressure favoring adaptability, the same invisible mathematics that determines which species survives and which becomes a fossil. If you want to understand the deep patterns underlying why certain creatures thrived while others vanished, the actual mechanisms, not just the narrative drama, I've written a comprehensive guide exploring how extinction truly works across deep time. It breaks down the ecological, climatic, and behavioral signals that predict which species will dominate and which will fade. You'll find the full guide in the description and linked in the top comment. It's a paid resource, but it contains patterns you won't find anywhere else. The extinction of Gastornis teaches us something essential about power. Size is not destiny. Strength does not guarantee survival. The most formidable predator ever to walk North America was defeated not in combat, but through the slow pressure of competition against creatures 1/10 its mass. Hyaenodon did not need to be larger. It needed to be flexible, intelligent, and ruthless in ways that a specialized apex predator simply could not match. By the late Eocene, roughly 52 million years ago, the continent had transformed. The warm, humid world that had welcomed Gastornis was slowly cooling. Forests were beginning to give way to grasslands and savannas. The prey base was shifting, and in response, predators, including Hyaenodon, were shifting too. But here is what comes next, and it matters profoundly to understanding why Ice Age predators would eventually look so different from their Paleocene ancestors. The transition from Gastornis to Hyaenodon was not an endpoint. It was a doorway. Everything that followed, every pack hunter that would roam the continent for the next 50 million years, every apex predator from the Oligocene through the Pleistocene, every dire wolf and saber-tooth that would eventually dominate North America, all of it traces back to lessons learned during this ancient overturn. These coordinated hunters, Hyaenodon and its relatives, they were not inventing pack behavior from nothing. They were inheriting an ecosystem that demanded it. The prey animals were changing. Ungulates were becoming faster, more elusive, and critically, they were organizing into groups for protection. A solitary Gastornis, no matter how formidable, could not run down a herd of fleet-footed equids. Pack hunting solved that problem. What we see in Hyaenodon is the birth of a survival strategy that would persist, evolve, and eventually produce the dire wolves of the Pleistocene. The mechanics changed across millions of years, the social structure deepened, communication became more sophisticated, but the fundamental blueprint, multiple hunters coordinating to take prey larger than any individual could manage alone, that originated here, in the broken world of the Paleocene-Eocene transition. Hold on, I need you to absorb something crucial for a moment. The way these ancient predators shaped themselves, their teeth, their social bonds, their hunting strategies, all of it reveals the deep patterns that would govern which species lived and which vanished when the ice ages arrived. If you want to truly understand why certain predators dominated the Pleistocene and others disappeared without a trace, you need to see these Paleocene and Eocene innovations in context. That complete breakdown, the patterns and mechanisms that determined survival across 60 million years, is covered in depth in our comprehensive guide, available in the description and pinned in the top comment. It's a paid resource, but it walks you through the actual skeletal evidence, the prey preferences, and the behavioral shifts that made some predators irreplaceable. The transformation from Gastornis to Hyaenodon did not happen overnight. Fossils from the early Eocene show intermediate forms, species that retained some of Gastornis's bulk but possessed teeth and jaws more suited to tearing soft tissue, species with Hyaenodon's pack-adapted skull, but limbs still slightly too robust for the kind of sustained running that pack hunters need. Evolution does not leap. It inches forward through thousands of generations, each incremental change filtering through the demands of survival. Fossils from places like the Green River Formation in Wyoming give us snapshots of this transition. Layers of sediment separated by just a few feet represent thousands of years of time. The predators in the lower beds are heavier, their teeth more suited to crushing bone. The predators in the upper beds are leaner, their teeth sharper, their pack hunting adaptations more pronounced. This is not speculation. These are physical specimens, carefully catalogued and studied for decades. What becomes clear is that Hyaenodon did not simply outcompete Gastornis through raw strength or intelligence. Rather, Hyaenodon was exquisitely suited to a world that was becoming unrecognizable to the thunder lizards. As the climate warmed and forests opened, as prey animals reorganized themselves into herds, the specialized terror bird, built for ambush, for solitary power, for an ecosystem of scattered prey, became obsolete. The new world had no use for it. This is where the Ice Age giants truly begin their story. Not with mammoths or saber-teeth, but with this ancient lesson: dominance belongs to the predator that fits the world as it is, not as it was. Hyaenodon's success proved that cooperative hunting, that social complexity, that willingness to evolve dentition and body shape in response to prey behavior, these traits were golden. They would be refined over millions of years, they would produce apex predators of astonishing sophistication, and eventually they would enable a species to hunt the largest, most dangerous prey animals North America had ever seen. The dire wolves that would hunt mammoths across the Pleistocene tundra, the saber-tooth cats that would bring down ground sloths twice their own weight, the coordinated pack strategies that allowed early human hunters to fell mastodons, all of it traces to lessons written in bone and fossil 60 million years ago. 60 million years of refinement. That is the span separating Hyaenodon from the creatures that would dominate the Pleistocene. 6 times the age of the dinosaurs themselves have vanished since these early hunters prowled their broken forests. Yet the template they perfected, social hunting, adaptive dentition, the calculated stalking of prey larger than oneself, never went obsolete. It metastasized. It evolved into something far more lethal. Consider the physical inheritance. Hyaenodon's jaws delivered crushing force through a bite designed to shatter bone. Dire wolves inherited that strength and refined it further. Their premolars became specialized bone crackers that could pulverize the leg bones of mammoths, extracting the nutrient-rich marrow inside. The same anatomical logic. The same predatory philosophy, but applied to prey that was exponentially larger, exponentially more dangerous. The Paleocene terror birds, Gastornis with her sickle claw and powerful legs, hunted by surprise. Speed and the element of shock. That worked in a world of mid-sized prey. But when you face a woolly mammoth that can weigh 6 tons, that can defend herself with tusks as long as a man is tall, shock alone is worthless. You need numbers, you need coordination, you need the capacity to communicate strategy across a pack stretched across a mile of open tundra. This is where those Paleocene lessons became absolutely critical. Hyaenodon survived for 25 million years precisely because her kind understood that alone, no matter how fast, no matter how large, you cannot reliably kill prey that exceeds your own body weight by a factor of 3, 4, 5. You need your family. You need their teeth. You need their willingness to rush at a target that can crush them with a single blow of its head. Dire wolves were not, contrary to what many believe, oversized versions of gray wolves that would emerge later. They were built differently, stockier, more robust in the shoulders and forelimbs. Their legs were relatively shorter, but more powerfully muscled. They could not outrun a caribou. But they did not need to. They needed to endure, to maintain pressure on a mammoth or a ground sloth until exhaustion and blood loss took their inevitable toll. The Paleocene gave us the principle. The Pleistocene perfected the practice. Those packs that hunted the Brea tar pits of Los Angeles, those that ranged across the Great Plains, those that pursued mammoth herds into the Ice Age valleys of North America, they were the direct ideological eggers of Hyaenodon's cooperative model. 60 million years of evolutionary continuity. Most people never think about the past that way. They imagine evolution as a series of disconnected inventions. New creatures pop into existence. They are successful or they fail. But the real story is far more continuous than that. The strategies that worked in the Paleocene did not disappear. They were refined. They were weaponized. They were passed forward through the entire Cenozoic, accumulating sophistication with each million years. Before we continue, I need you to focus on something crucial for a moment. The mechanisms behind these predatory transformations, how teeth reshaping occurs, why pack behavior became heritable rather than learned, what drove the scaling of body size across millions of years. Those are the deeper patterns you need to understand if you want to truly grasp how the Ice Age giants came to be. That is exactly what the comprehensive guide I created explores in exhaustive detail. You will find it in the description below, and I have pinned it in the top comment so you can access it immediately. It is a paid resource, and frankly, it contains the anatomical data and evolutionary timelines that most documentaries skip over entirely because they require real work to explain. But once you understand those mechanisms, everything that happens in the Pleistocene becomes not just inevitable, but obvious. The shift from the Paleocene to the Pleistocene represents more than just a climatic change. It represents the fullest expression of predatory strategies that had been developing throughout the entire age of mammals. The prey animals themselves had evolved too, Mammoths grew larger, their skin thickened, their tusks became more formidable. Ground sloths developed armor-like dermal plates and the capacity to rear up on their hind legs, transforming their bodies into 6-ton battering rams. Horses diversified, became faster, developed different grazing strategies across different habitats. And the predators responded. Always they responded. The predators of the Pleistocene were not accidents of evolution. They were the inevitable answer to a question the Paleocene terror birds had posed but never fully solved. How do you hunt the largest animals on Earth? The saber-tooth cat solved it with precision and lethal grace. The dire wolf solved it with strategy and numbers. The American lion solved it with raw dominance. These were not creatures simply living off the land. They were architects of their own ecological moment, refining hunting techniques across thousands of generations until they became something that North America had never quite seen before. And this is the secret I promised you at the beginning. The terror birds were not failures. They were the prototype. Everything that came after, every pack hunter, every ambush predator, every apex carnivore that would dominate the Pleistocene and inspire the nightmares of early humans arriving on this continent, traces its strategic DNA back to those Paleocene creatures that learned to hunt megafauna in a world where the rules were still being written. The saber-tooth did not invent hunting large prey. The terror birds invented it. The cats and wolves simply perfected it. The mammoths, mastodons, and giant ground sloths did not simply appear in the Pleistocene by chance. They appeared because predators had already proven that mega-sized prey animals could be successfully hunted, so the prey animals got bigger in response. Larger bodies meant longer lives, more time to reproduce, greater capacity to survive the climate shifts that defined the ice ages. But larger bodies also meant more meat, more calories, more reason for predators to continue growing, continue coordinating, continue developing the techniques that would allow a pack of wolves to bring down an animal that weighed 8 tons. This was the arms race that defined 50,000 years of North American prehistory. Predator and prey locked in an escalating spiral where each innovation, by one side, forced an innovation by the other. The terror birds opened that door in the Paleocene. The giants that followed simply walked through it. When the climate shifted again at the end of the Pleistocene, roughly 13,000 years ago, it was not just the megafauna that collapsed. The entire predatory system that had been perfected over millions of years fell apart almost overnight. The mammoths died, the mastodons vanished, the ground sloths disappeared. And without them, the saber-tooth cats had nothing to hunt. The dire wolves had nothing to chase. The American lions had no reason to roam. Humans arrived during this collapse. Early Paleo-Indians hunted some of the remaining megafauna, certainly, but the real killer was climate. The grasslands transformed into forests. The ice sheets retreated northward. The animals that had thrived in cold, open terrain had nowhere left to go. The predators that depended on them had nowhere left to hunt. Within a few centuries, the entire ecosystem that had been shaped by the terror birds and perfected by the Pleistocene giants was gone. But the legacy remained, in the fossil record, in the genetic code of modern predators who carry the behavioral patterns that their Pleistocene ancestors refined. In the way that modern wolves still hunt in coordinated packs, using the same strategies that dire wolves used to take down mastodons. In the way that modern big cats still employ ambush and stealth, echoing techniques that saber-tooth cats perfected on prey animals that no longer exist. The terror birds of the Paleocene did not survive to the Ice Age, but they changed everything that came after. They proved that large prey animals could be killed. They proved that predators could coordinate. They proved that the biggest, most powerful animals on Earth could be brought down through intelligence, strategy, and adaptation. That is the story that most people miss when they look at the Pleistocene megafauna. They see the mammoths and think of strength. They see the saber-tooth cats and think of teeth. But if you trace the line backward through the fossil record, if you understand the mechanisms that drove predatory evolution across millions of years, you realize that every giant predator walking across an ice age landscape was standing on the shoulders of creatures that had already solved the problem of hunting the largest animals alive. The Paleocene terror birds were not stepping stones to greater things. They were the architects. The Pleistocene giants were simply building on their foundation. Take that realization with you. The next time you see a mammoth or a saber-tooth cat in a museum, ask yourself this: what came before? What hunter first proved that these massive animals could be vulnerable? Where did the strategy originate? Answer those questions honestly, and you will understand not just the Pleistocene, but the entire 50 million year conversation between predator and prey that made the Ice Age what it was. Thank you for walking through this ancient world with me. If this deep dive into the Pleistocene changed how you see these giants, I would genuinely love to hear which predator or prey animal captivated you most. Drop a comment below and let me know. And please, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new episode exploring the lost giants of North America.